So we'll talk about that. That is what's being proposed, but there are a couple of things that changed inside the budget that do impact that. So we're going to look at everything, the full picture. So that is exactly what our budget is proposed, but we've done some adjustments and some changes in a contingency number and things like that that does impact that. Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Well, yes and no. It actually, we reduced a contingency number, which did make
Jim, how are you?
But I just want to make sure everybody understands and we're fully transparent with how that came together. So we'll talk about that tonight.
Pick on me, Matt.
By the way, just as a side note, I talked to Jason, he is planning on bringing that up at the union meeting
This week?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we might be on board all by Friday.
Good.
Thank you, Les. That's where you I would like to know. Especially that.
Mr. Nisley, how are you this evening? Yes. It has. Everything good? Son's doing all right?
Doing testing. Thanks, Rich.
You bet. I think we might be off the camera.
Okay, everybody, it's 4:30. Let's get going.
That's good.
Yeah, I think so.
We wouldn't want to start too late. I think, are we on YouTube?
Yes.
Okay, we are broadcasting, everybody. Keep that in mind. Thanks, Les. And let's proceed with the work session. I have to confess, I think I walked off without my work session agenda, but let's call the meeting to order. And let's see, we need to do a roll call for a work session. I can't remember. We do? Okay. Nope, here it is. Thank you, Terry. Okay.
Nisley,
Here.
Tryon. Here. Bowles.
Here.
Lucas.
Here.
Garrick. Here. Carmen.
Here.
Rieger.
Here.
Woods.
Here.
Thank you. There's a copy of the Open Meetings Act back there in the corner, if anyone needs to review it. There will be no formal vote or action will be taken during this meeting. This meeting will last until just before 5:30, or if we conclude sooner, that is perfectly all right as well. The discussion tonight is regarding the 2021-2022 City of North Platte budget. Mr. Gibbon and Mrs. Miller, please take it away.
Thanks, Mayor Kelleher. A couple of things before we start. I'm going to try an attempt at humor similar to Brandon's. Everything you see here is Dawn's budget, nobody else's. So, if there are any questions about her? No, on a more serious note, last year I think was one of the first times where we did a cursory review of the budget and allowed you all to, the previous council, to study this and come back and provide feedback between now and when the budget would go for final approval. And so we ran with that process again. I think I know the staff worked very diligently to keep our budget as flat as we possibly could. There are some capital expenditures included in the budget, and each of those departments will explain those as we work through this. Given an hour, we'll move pretty rapidly through tonight's review. I'll provide you, or Dawn will provide you, highlights on what the significant changes are throughout the budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dawn to review the first packet of sheets, which you'll hand out right now, I guess. We've made a couple adjustments in this process too, to something that's been difficult for me to wrap my head around in city government is we budget to spend everything, and included within our budget, especially on the administration and finance side, was our contingency, which is a big number, and every year we show that we're going to expend every dollar of that, and we'll get into greater detail surrounding that conversation as we move through this. Thanks, Kurt. And let me know if you receive any text messages that the folks outside of this room can't hear me.
Looks good so far.
Okay. Take it away, Dawn.
Okay. So thank you again for letting us present this evening, and I echo Matt's comments with respect to the staff. I think they've done an excellent job again this year, working really hard. We asked that they work as diligently as they could to stay within the budget that we presented last year. We knew that was going to be extremely challenging given some of the items that we needed to implement based upon bargaining agreements that were approved last year, and we wanted to adjust some salaries in this year's budget. So we knew that that was going to be a lofty task, but I think they've done a great job, and so we will present to you this evening where we're at this point. I did pass out a packet to you, and if you don't mind, we will go through that just kind of in the order that they appear, so that's why I wanted to wait until we were ready to start to distribute those. The very top page is where I often say our budget process really kind of starts, at least maybe at my desk, after the departments have done their diligent work and given us details. So we typically take a look at the expenditures, as far as the expenditures that the departments are estimating for the year we're currently in. So for our 2021 fiscal year, they provide us with estimates as to where they believe they will end the year. And so this top sheet compares that to where the budget numbers were for that same period. We do the same with the revenues. And so the difference would tell us that is what we are projecting as a cash balance at the end of our 2021 fiscal year. So the $5,588,911 is that number that we will be using moving forward in the very first revenue item. Yes.
Excuse me, Dawn, and my ignorance here, but I think Matt made a comment about having to spend the entire budget. So does that mean that we're going to spend roughly $3 million before the end of the year?
It does not.
Okay.
And that may have been more along the lines of our contingency number that we have in the past used essentially as our balancing number. But we're going to talk about our plan to implement actually a cash balance. And so we'll get to that shortly.
Okay.
And so this is very positive for multiple reasons, and we do not plan to spend that. But that'll allow us to kickstart some other positive changes.
Don, I don't mean to jump ahead on that topic, but I know last year we talked a lot about the budgeting of a cash reserve growth. Was there any of that in this year's estimated expenses, or was that all in contingency?
There is. We are budgeting a cash reserve, which will be out using some of this for a cash reserve, and it will be shown outside of our budget. So we do still plan to have a contingency amount. It just won't be quite as large as it has been in the past, but we will then also have a cash reserve based on the preliminary numbers that we're giving you.
But is there not one then baked into the expenditures to date for 21? Does it have a cash reserve allocation in
For
it?
our 21 budget does
Okay.
not. It is all contained in contingency.
Okay, thank you.
So the second page here is a detail by department, and this compares, again, the summary number that was on the first page, the department's estimates for 2021 compared to their budget for 2021. And that shows the difference of 2.78 million, which is the one piece of our cash balance. The third page is a presentation, a summary, again by department, of the 2022 budgeted expenditures that the departments have submitted. And the percent change on the far right-hand side of the page is the change between the 2022 budget and the 2021 budget. So the very, the bottom of the page, the bottom right-hand corner reflects a 3.29% overall change. I do want to back up just a little bit with this particular document. And as Matt indicated, we have tried to adjust the presentation to you tonight to reduce the amount of the admin finance budget shown on top to exclude contingency. So again, that has previously been our budget balancer, and we've generally not spent much, if any, of that amount. And so we believe that to truly compare budget with actual expenditures, that it's best to pull that contingency amount out of our budgeted numbers. And so this top portion, again, those totals reflect no contingency for the three budgeted columns that appears. And then towards the bottom of the sheet, we do show you what the contingency numbers are for each of those respective budget years. And then the resulting totals, which agrees to the page we just looked at. So we do show again the 3.29% overall budget increase. However, if we back up and we look at the numbers that exclude contingency, there is a 7.71% budget increase. So want to make sure that that's very clear to everyone as far as where we're at this point. Last year's budgeted contingency was just over 2.2 million. This year, as you can see, we are planning to budget 1 million in contingency, but again, also to start the cash reserve piece as well. So the fourth sheet, again, certainly for your consideration and your studying as you move forward, but again, just a slightly different presentation that does not break out the contingency. So this is the all-in picture, showing you again that 3.29% at the bottom. The fifth sheet, which has a heading capital and lease payment expenditures at the top. What we wanted to do was go back and look historically at the capital that we have included in our operating budget. And so that's what this document attempts to do for you. And if you look at the bottom, the right-hand column there, the $580,618, that is actually the amount that this year's budget exceeds last year's budget from a capital expenditures perspective. So our current proposed budget for 2022 includes $580,000 more in capital than our 2021 budget did.
Will we be able to understand what some of those capital expenditures will be?
Definitely, definitely. Again, we're really kind of hitting the high points at the department or at the fund level at this point, Councilman Reeker, and then we will dig into the details of the individual departments as our time allows.
One of the things that comes to mind, I guess, Dawn, is how is the elimination of the golf course reflected in our budget?
The elimination of the golf course is not reflected in this piece that we're reviewing this evening. This is just our general fund. And so the elimination of the golf course is not here, other than the fact that in the past we have had some transfers that were budgeted to the golf course. Other than that piece, this is not impacted by the golf course. That was a separate fund, other
Okay.
than, yes. Let's see, and we are on. Yes, okay, perfect. Okay, the next sheet is beginning the discussion that we've already alluded to, which is the cash reserve piece of this year's budget. Again, this is something that we've been discussing, the auditors have recommended, and it's been a goal internally here for the last year to really work hard to put ourselves in a position to begin to budget a cash reserve. And so I'm very excited. Again, this gets back to our departments all working very hard to put us in this position to help us get there. So the $3,305,000 is the amount that we're currently proposing be considered as the beginning of establishing a cash reserve for the city. And then the next page kind of, again, shows us a little more detail as to how we got to that $3.3 million figure.
Can you give us just a quick overview what the difference between a contingency fund and a cash reserve and the logic behind the two differences?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, the contingency account has always been our budget balancer in the past. And typically, really historically, if we could be at $1 million there, that was about the best that we've been able to do. Last year, as you know, we were at 2.2. And so with the contingency fund, we've typically spent little, if any, of that. So that has always been there for us, and we've kind of treated that as a cash reserve. But it's a little bit challenging because it does skew our budgeted expenditures. And so even though we know internally that we're likely not going to spend out of contingency, we're still charged with it as being an expenditure. So what we have proposed in this budget is still to have a contingency. We just believe that we do need something in there to be prudent for those things that may come up that we don't know or might not be expecting. And so we have we're currently showing $1 million in contingency, which would still leave us the 3.3 as a cash reserve. So the cash reserve will show up as we submit a budget form to the state outside of the city's budgeted expenditures. So on the form, there'll be a bottom line that I haven't ever had the opportunity to use, but this will start that process for the general fund.
Gotcha. So it's more of an accounting thing, like Matt was talking about, trying to get to that zero balance of expenditure, correct?
It is.
Okay,
It
perfect.
is. We do. We will actually have, we will have a zero balance after we would reduce this cash reserve.
Gotcha.
So, yes, the
Thank you.
3.3 would be our balance if we were just looking at revenues and expenditures per the budget.
You may take a moment and explain what it means to be on the state forms and the process if we were to need or want to use cash reserve.
Yes.
Just briefly.
Sure. So if we were to need cash reserve, and again, we will be doing this, we will be looking citywide with all of our funds. And the state looks at our budget as a large entity. Tonight's discussion is focused on general fund. So if we were to need to amend our budget, we would actually have to go through a process and bring an action item to the council. And there would be a publication process along with that. And again, since we've not previously budgeted with a cash reserve, we have not ever had the need to do a formal budget amendment. But there is a process to do that
Gotcha.
based on state statute.
So, Don, what would a circumstance in which we might need to use some of that would be like a building burnt down or, something rather unusual, probably?
It would be something significant. And again, as you're looking citywide, one of the things I hear communities talk about who have used a cash reserve process, maybe they have an opportunity to refinance some bonds. And they weren't planning on that. And so with the budget requirements, we would have to show expenses related to that as you retire and refinance those. That seems to be some of the conversation that I hear with other finance directors. You have maybe a large storm or something. That's probably not the best example, though, because we do have insurance coverages there. If say, fuel maybe skyrocketed or something like that, and there was a requirement, a need for additional monies outside of our contingency, then we would have to do a budget amendment to take care of that.
Okay, Dawn, I have a question. Two questions, I guess. Does the state have a recommendation for what the balance of either one of these should be? Number one. Number two is there a cap on how much you can grow this?
Let us get to the next slide.
Yep.
or next-
Oh.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm ahead of you.
Perfect.
Okay,
No, and I
thanks.
think that's a great segue. So if you take a look at the last sheet in that stack, we have just a summary of a general fund cash reserve analysis. Just wanting to show you our 2022 budget is being proposed tonight at $32,629,629. Currently, we are projecting a $3.3 million cash reserve. And so in reaching out and just doing some research, I've kind of heard anywhere from 2 to 6 months as far as suggested cash reserves. When I reach out to
2 to 6 months. of operating expenses.
Exactly. When I reach out to the audit firm, she, in her benchmarking that she provided to us, used a 4-month operating reserve number as far as a target. And so that's the reason we're showing these 4 different thresholds based upon those percentages. And so I think this is something that, as a group, we'll continue to have discussion, because eventually we will probably want to formulate a formal policy of some sort based on a consensus and a decision direction by the council. With that, the 3.3 million that we're at is a 10.13%. So between the 1 and 2 month reserve numbers that we're proposing to start the process with.
I would just piggyback that I believe at least that the 4 month is probably a good target for the city of North Platte. I would like to start also considering capital reserve for building improvements, i.e., we talk about, there's a lot of conversation in the community right now about the recreation center. Second one, in my mind, and probably in my mind more important, the public safety facility and being able to do something with those folks. Right now, this reserve would be separate and independent. So maybe there's a discussion about, reducing the amount in the cash reserve to say a 1 to 2 month right now, or 1 month, and then start building a capital reserve account for facility purposes as well. Just a suggestion.
Don, I wanted to understand the reconciliation, a little bit of that reserve. So like this year, if we end up with an estimated 5.6 net, does that then roll into revenue and then get moved the budget? Does that become part of revenue for the following year, or does the reserve in essence move to 9 million between last year and this year? In other words, is that reserve kind of in the bank, or does that flow then forward in the budget?
So it would be in the bank, if you will. We would be showing that as a revenue, but we would not be budgeting to spend 100% as we have previously. So the 3.3 million would be the residual number that would show up outside of the revenue and expenses piece. Does that answer?
Yeah, okay, maybe I should take back to see if I get this right. So I guess, so does that mean we'd be lowering reserves from where we look like we'll end up this budget year? Or where does the, I know we don't work for profit, but if we called it the profit,
Sure.
the revenue over expenses, if that comes in at 5.6 this year, and I understand that ties to probably specialty things with the pandemic, but where does that sit? Does that flow into this 2022 budget at all? Or?
Yes, it does. It does. It will be presented as a revenue into the 2022 budget, but we will have $3 million less in expenses than we will have in total revenues.
Okay.
I think, if I'm understanding your question correctly, Councilman Lucas, so if we, and Dawn, I might need help with the math here, so if we take the 5.588, is that the number you're referencing? And subtract off the 3.305, the difference there, the delta there is built into this expenditure side of the budget.
Yes.
Right. So we've got more expenditures and revenue projected by roughly 2.3 million in this next budget.
That's
Is that right?
correct.
Okay.
And recall that in the budget instructions to the department heads, we did have a 3.5% increase in wages across the board in the city. So that's going to make up a large portion of that 2.3 million.
Okay. No, thank you.
Before we jump into the next piece, a couple of closing thoughts. The first would be on the estimated cash balance. As you can see, last year we went through what I would call a painful budgeting process and asking departments for a 10% reduction. I think we achieved something around a 6% reduction, if memory serves me correctly. And again, this year, we're narrowing the amount of estimated cash balance on those on the departmental basis. If you look at the general fund budget summary. And remember that the reason for the budget reduction was from a couple of different angles. One was the cash flow and running into cash flow issues a couple of times a year. And then the other was, refresh my memory. I think.
And just to start to think about building the cash
And
reserve
that's,
as
yes,
well.
so the other part of it was to start building the cash reserve. Thank you. I drew a blank there for a moment. And so I think combined, we've achieved both of those. I think Dawn stated to me anyway, not to put words in her mouth, this is the first time where we haven't run into those nervous issues on an annual basis, number one. And number two is clearly we're achieving some goal in establishing the cash reserve, some of which may be a result of additional revenues as well.
How much of that revenue stream was a result of federal payments because of this Chinese flu epidemic?
There actually was none of, again, the general fund revenue stream that was a result of that, Councilman Rieger, because those funds will be set up in a new fund, a separate fund, and so the general fund did not reflect any of that. I believe we may have had, but again, though that I believe went all into either a grants fund or a special fund. Now, and you ask as far as the monies that came in, certainly our sales taxes have been at a higher level. And so those monies have contributed to the cash balance by roughly $1 million there. And the other thing that is the big contributor would be the fact that we ended 2020 in a better position than we estimated, also by about $1 million. So those were the significant pieces of the revenue differences.
So with this money that we receive from the federal government, you said it's in a different account. What does that mean? I don't understand that.
Yep. So we are going to separate that. That has been placed in our grant fund. So it's segregated and we can establish specific uses for those monies outside of general operating expenses.
And is that something the council will approve? Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So the idea from my seat, I believe, similar to the New Bern Fund. So I'm not sure when that was established, but we want to be able to invest those funds that we receive from the federal government, and in my mind, for capital expenditures, police, fire vehicles, other, if we can pull the interest like we do off of the New Bern Fund, that seems like a good way to use it. But those are the decisions the policymakers in the room get to make. That would be a suggestion. You guys may have alternative suggestions that you think are high priority, and we would write an investment policy. I think that needs to be looked at holistically for the city, because right now it's specific, if I remember right, it's specific to the New Bern Fund only. And maybe we need to take from a policy standpoint, a look at that investment policy and determine if it needs to be revised, modified, include this fund or not include this funds. So there should be a discussion on this at a later date, for sure.
If you were to estimate a number, how much is in that fund?
From the federal government, 1.9 is just purely a guess, maybe 2? I think 2.
Okay. Thank you.
So jumping into the detail sheets here, the first 3 pages are the revenues. Don't really have anything specific to highlight on the revenue sheets, but make sure you gander at those and make sure that we haven't overestimated or underestimated in your eyes what the revenues coming to the city will be. So jumping into the first department, which is administration and finance, I'll let Dawn follow me. I just have a couple of priorities that I had and or the mayor had for the city. So in the building maintenance and repair, which is 54,110, you'll see a pretty significant increase there. Included in there, we have a roofing consultant for City Hall. So we've had a couple of significant weather events this year, and we had water coming in every possible place, including running through our light fixtures and the awnings outside the front of the building. And so for $20,000, we're looking to hire a design consultant to help us with the roof. It's a consultant that I have a lot of experience with. They did all the roofs at the place I was formerly employed, and I know they'll do a bang-up job for the city. The second one is office renovations. I believe, and Brandon believes also, that we need to continue the progress we've made in the 3 offices. Brandon's office, the administrative assistant's office, and my office, specifically focusing in on the conference room next door is the next step. That's a total of $10,000 I think we plugged in there for that. The next item is other contract services, 56,590. There are 3 contract services that I think we need to focus on over the next year. The first is risk management consulting. As you know, last year we went from 3 years to 2 years with LARM on our property, casualty, and workman's compensation insurance. We do not have a risk management expert within our organization, and seeking outside help makes sense to me to make sure we get the right insurance program for those 3 insurances. So there is, I forgot to write the number down, $30,000 in there for that consultant. And then the second one that's important to me is safety. Our safety obviously drives our workman's compensation insurance, and we have a safety committee, and they work very hard at trying to establish a process. Although that said, there's room for improvement. And I have past experience with a consultant that will come in and do a 3-day workshop with employees that are in charge of departments and help us establish, and then continue to provide coaching for a period, I think, of a year, maybe 2 years. And we're splitting that cost with municipal light and water as well. This budget is $7,240. The third consultant is SDK, which is establishing an odor baseline in the city of North Platte. Obviously, we know we have a potential economic development project coming to North Platte, and Brandon thought it would be prudent to thwart off any challenges that we have regarding odors in North Platte. Suggested we reach out and establish a baseline. I think it's a great idea. So we have $25,000 in that line item for that. And then the last one that I'd like to highlight is the sales tax to the Quality Growth Fund, which is the last line item on the sheet, 9160. You can see it's a 60.74% increase, and that is money's moving to the Quality Growth Fund, something to celebrate. And then if you want to speak to salaries and wages.
Just out of curiosity, how do we establish an odor baseline?
So, this is actually
kind of interesting. Done quite a bit of research on this. And I started down the path of looking for something that was automated. And those things do exist, but when it comes right down to it, the human nose is far better at recognizing odors than any machine is at this point. Machines can recognize chemical signatures, but not so much odors. Odors really are chemical signatures. So the tool that will most likely be used is something called a Nasal Ranger. And it's this sort of long, about yay long, and someone holds it up to the nose, and they put various filters on the end of it. And then the program that we will most likely set up in the community is we will have some volunteers and probably a couple of city staff members, and they'll go to specific spots, record the weather conditions, the wind condition, the temperature, and then they will use the various filters in the Nasal Ranger actually inhaling to see what, if anything, they can smell. Then the Nasal Ranger filters identify the chemicals in the air and thus the odors. So, for example, cow manure is, it's a variant of nitrous oxide, I believe, is actually what produces the odor of manure that smells bad to us. nitric oxide, not nitrous. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll go to various spots around our community and we'll establish a baseline of what it looks like what the smell signature is when the temperature is 65 degrees and the wind's blowing from the north and things like that, and we'll check it on a regular basis. With the potential arrival of sustainable beef, it is possible that odors would be introduced into the city at some point. It might be sustainable beef. It might be something that builds around sustainable beef. The only way to detect what the odor is really coming from is to have a mobile device that you can go from place to place and identify the chemical and thereby the odor. So this company that we're talking about, they're experts in this. They will come in, they'll provide the equipment, but then they'll train the people to do it. So we here in the city will actually do the work. They're coming in and providing equipment, and they'll help us, remotely if we need assistance in it. So that's how it works. It'll be quite a deal. I think it's something we can actually make public. We can put a map on the website that says, this is where we evaluate. Since we have potential industry to the east of us and potential industry to the west of us, although a little further to the west with the rail park, I think it's important that we get this done before any of that building starts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. I mean, I don't know, it's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah, and obviously you'll get to hear the consultant's presentation, and you can ask them whatever questions you want when we actually do it.
Just my curiosity. Thank you, Brandon.
No, it's interesting, and I spent quite a bit of time reading about it. I think you'll find it interesting. So.
Okay.
So from a salaries and benefits perspective, you can certainly see that we are showing about a 16 to 20% increase there. Essentially, that is one FTE. For this year's estimates, we currently have 7 employees who are charged to the admin and finance department. In next year's budget, we would be proposing 2 additional employees. However, 2 of them would get split with the utilities. And so we would be proposing a senior accountant level position as well as a human resources and benefits tech position. The reason for that would be to start establishing some better redundancies and cross trainings than we previously have, and just start garnering, getting an additional individual up to speed in some areas that we have not been able to focus on doing in the past. With Jill joining our team as our human resources director, it's become apparent that there is additional details that we would like to have an additional person assist us with from a payroll and benefits perspective. We do have a lot of benefits related questions that our payroll technician currently addresses, and so we would like to be able to get an additional person in to cross-train with our payroll technician to serve as a backup also from a payroll processing perspective, and also to become a specialist to assist employees with benefits related questions.
I would just add, I think, Don's certainly got a really good handle on the finances in the city, but knowledge transfer is always very, very important. We see it in 2 very important shops in our government, which is police and fire, and there's the fire chief and the deputy fire chief, and the police and the deputy police chief. We have Dawn, who lives 30 miles south of town. If an elk runs out in front of her and something catastrophic happens, wouldn't be the end of the world. We'll figure it out, but it's certainly going to be a setback for a period of time. And so having some redundancy is really important to me.
So is there a number of positions, that you're thinking about?
Yes, Councilwoman Tryon, it would be two positions that are being proposed. We are proposing splitting the Director of Finance position 50-50 between the electric fund, as well as should the senior accountant position be approved, that position would be split 50-50 as well. So the net change would be 1 FTE to general.
Thank you.
Mayor and council budget, effectively no changes there, except the health and life insurance. And that's life insurance that's offered to the city council members.
How much are we worth now?
Probably depends on who you ask.
Approximately 4.74%
Oh, dear.
The next item is legal. Take a look at the changes there. What we did is combine a bunch of, as you can see there, we had small numbers in a bunch of different accounts, and we've combined those into two accounts. Essentially, Terry acts as a contractor to the city or consultant to the city. So. Information systems. There's a couple of changes here, and it's pretty good percentage increase, pretty high percentage increase. And so if Les would have a moment to hop up and explain some of the changes in the IT world for the council members.
So I've got about 3 items in my budget that really kind of explode my budget. We run software in the city as long as we can possibly run it before we have to upgrade to the new. Every year we don't come in here and get the latest and greatest software. So the servers and all the back end stuff that runs the entire network here for the city, it's running Microsoft 2012. Well, 2022, Microsoft says that's it. We're no longer going to support it anymore. So I've got to upgrade the server software. And in order to do that, I got a couple of pieces of hardware in here that I've also got to upgrade with those. They're going to come out with a new version, October-ish timeframe, Microsoft will, Microsoft Server. And so that'll be Server 2021. Hopefully I won't have to see you again until 2031. We'll run it as long as we possibly can at that point as well. The other thing is telephones. The only other item in my budget is telephones. So the phone system that we run here in the city, the Watsu phone company, or Watsu LLC or something like that, not an LLC, anyway, a Watsu Phone Corporation, their manufacturing plant was a short distance, and I mean a really short distance from this Fukushima nuclear reactor in Japan when the tsunami hit. And that was in 2011, so we're going on 10 years now that Watsu said, well, we're done. They closed up shop. They sold all of their code to Alcatel-Lucent, and that is, we've done some looking into, and that's who we're looking at. We've gotten some quotes on a phone system. That's the other big item in my budget, because the only place I can get replacement parts for the phone system is eBay and other used places on the internet. We basically, if something breaks and nobody's got it, we're dead in the water as far as telephones go. So that's effectively the big items in my budget, kind of gotta have.
Les, so you're upgrading the operating systems of your servers. Do you have that baked in to this number, operating the applications that run on those servers?
And that's, I'm already kind of being forced, some of the applications we're holding because I'm still running 2012, Server 2012, and they already said we won't run on anything less than Server 2016, which we just kind of skipped over, trying to run this thing to the end as long as we possibly can before we have to spend the money.
So you won't have to spend any extra for the applications that run on the OS?
No, most of them have a version that I can run on 2019. I just
Gotcha.
got to get my 2019 replaced.
Gotcha.
And a lot of those we have service contracts with and all that, so they're waiting on us to upgrade.
Thank you.
Thank you, Les.
Yes, sir.
On page 8, governmental and education TV, obviously that's the live streaming and the TV channel. And then on civil service, one of the things that was, well, we're continuing to be challenged with is recruitment of police officers, and I think fire department has a little better success. So here we've increased the budget to $10,000, and primarily that cost is related to advertising. The amount of advertising that we have to do and the number of times that we have to do it. The budget at $2,700 or $3,000 wasn't even close to covering the cost of that advertising.
Matt, I don't need to rush you, but you've got about 12 minutes.
Okay, we're good. We are. Page 10 is engineering, and Brent, if you would come up and explain line 56,300, which is professional fees other, briefly.
Good evening, Brent Burke, the city engineer. And on the budget, what we have this year, as we've gone through different developments and projects, significant increase we had was for professional fees. And what we were looking at was 2013 was the last time we've done a traffic study in the community. And with the projects that are being looked at, we were looking at traffic study and also some bridge work. Having the engineering fees for the traffic study and bridge work, that was the two main items that we were looking at for this coming fiscal year.
Thank you. Uniform patrol, Chief Hudson, if you'd want to come up. The outside of the wages, the significant change would be in the capital expenditures, vehicles, 75,000, third up from the bottom.
And what we're requesting this year is basically through our capitals. Last year, we didn't buy any police cars. We actually bought one police car out of some donation funds. This year, we were through a donation. We're budgeting for a police canine, a narcotics canine. Narcotics seems to be an ongoing significant problem that we have in our community. So we will be purchasing a canine through donated funds, but with that comes a specific vehicle because so we're actually putting in to replace 3 of our patrol vehicles. That will be 2 of our old Ford Tauruses, and then 1 old Chevy Tahoe. So we'll be at a complete Ford Explorer fleet, and then the canine vehicle will be an add-on. The canine vehicle is much more expensive to build up because it's a one-off as far as now we have to buy all new radio equipment, there's all kinds of equipment that goes in a canine car, so the doors will open if it gets to a certain temperature, there's fan systems, there's cooling systems and stuff like that. PR-wise, if you have a police dog die in the backseat of an overheated car, it is a nightmare. So there's all these different things that are put in place to make sure, like I said, if it gets to a certain temperature, the doors just open, so the dog can get out. So that's our big ones with those. Then there's one other position that we're going to be adding, a full-time position back to animal control. We get a lot of complaints, a lot of emails about the hours at the animal shelter. In doing so, we're actually going to be moving a full-time employee that we haven't had filled for much of the last year from our records department over there, and then we'll be backfilling the records department with a part-time employee. So we're just kind of shuffling where people position in the thing, so that's our biggest one, it's the cars. And then again, that'll take us to all Fords, and then we'll start doing that replacement cycle again.
Chief,
Yes.
real quick, I know you're having problems recruiting, but is your manning, is your workforce sufficient right now?
No.
Okay.
We are,
Do you have any added people, any added patrol officers into this budget whatsoever?
no. Right now, we're down 5 with a possibility of going, rumor has it, we might be 6 down very fast. Our continued recruitment issues, our biggest recruitment issue lies in Colorado with a product that is sold there legally. It's not legal here. You can't get into the police academy if you've used a certain agricultural product. And we are having tremendous difficulty getting people through the polygraph and getting people into the academy.
Just real quick, thank you, Chief Hudson. I think your question was around, is the number of FTEs that you're allotted for your department sufficient for the population in North Platte right now?
As of right now, yeah, we have 41, we have one unfunded position, and we fund at 40, or 42 with 41 patrol officers.
Okay.
If we could get to 41, it's a significant.
So that number's sufficient,
Right
but
now.
we have to get there still.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So the animal control increase, you can see that was offset in another department, that's page 15. Page 16, fire suppression, one item there is capital. And Chief Thompson, if you would, please, 1 minute. To use Brandon's approach.
Mayor Keller and council, thank you. You'll notice on our suppression budget, our big ask is the replacement of an ambulance. This keeps us with our vehicle replacement schedule. In this particular case, this is an ambulance that has, it's a Ford. I don't know what y'all think about Ford, but what we have experienced with this particular ambulance, the engine it came out with was absolute trash, and it has cost us and cost us and cost us. So we would like to just continue, carry this budget line, continue. We made our last lease payment this year on our last ambulance. We'd just like to continue that lease purchase agreement on the next ambulance. And what we're seeing is a long build-out time. The sooner we can place these orders, the better the chassis and things, so.
Just out of curiosity, the ambulance that we have today, is that the one that broke in the hospital bay a couple weeks ago and dumped a bunch of oil into
Likely.
the? Okay.
Jumping to Lane Shop at Public Service, the first one is sanitation, and Lane, if it's all right with you, I'll steal your thunder. The lease purchase payments is the biggest increase in that shop, and it's for capital expenditure associated with garbage trucks. Our fleet is getting old and tired, and we need to make replacements. Otherwise, I'm sorry, that was page 22. Page 23, flat budget. Page 24, wage increases. Page 25 is an increase of 7.29%, largely due to fuel costs. That is a very difficult number to budget for, as you can imagine, varies significantly year over year, administration over administration. Recreation Center did a great job of holding a flat budget. Public Transit Administration is, we have a transition period there, and administration is going to continue to work to refine that budgetary number. So please bear with us until August on that. Senior Services and Senior Center, pages 28 and 29, RSVP, Cody Pool, flat budget, or essentially. And then recreation and music. Didn't have any highlights on those specific items. And then on the last page, essentially a recap. I'm sorry, last page is library. I'm sorry.
So Matt, what's our feedback mechanism for the council over the next couple of weeks?
Over the next couple of weeks, as you study this information, please feel free to send me an email, copy Brandon, and we'll take your comments very seriously and work with the departments if adjustments are necessary from the council's perspective. And then when you sit in August to work through the budget, consensus will be built amongst your group.
Anyone have any questions that will take less than 1 minute to answer? No pressure. Okay, please do send us your emails with your questions. Hopefully we can clarify as many things through that form of communication, and then we'll have another question and answer period, certainly before the budget is certified. So, thanks, everyone. If someone would be kind enough to motion an adjournment, that would be helpful.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, we will reconvene in about 3 minutes here for the city council meeting.
That's the senior center.
Where's the senior center?
RSVP.